Meet us where we are this day, O God, and open our hearts to you. Amen. You and I have a story. In fact, each of us have multiple stories that have been woven in and throughout our life to make up what we call the big story of our life. So how would you tell your story if you were asked to? This Is Us. You seen that? It's a new TV network show, began last fall. It's wildly popular. I understand it's been nominated for various awards. It's about a family and their connections and their relationships and the somewhat unique way this family began. Among the main characters, a husband and wife, are seen in their early days where their greatest passion is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay, they're in Pittsburgh. And young, single, then married, they are everything Steelers. I mean, their life revolves around the Steelers until, well, they become parents, which is quite a story. And their story changes, like us. Each of us has a story. Indeed, you and I have many stories that are threaded through our lives. I mean, think about how you would talk about your story, about our parents or our siblings, or raised in a small town or in the suburbs, born in Germany, raised as a military brat, moved from place to place as a kid, went to so-and-so college. I'm married, I'm single, I'm divorced, I'm widowed, I'm a father, I'm a mother, I'm a husband, I'm a wife, I'm a grandparent, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I'm apolitical, I'm bipartisan, I'm independent, I'm a dog lover, I'm a cat lover, I'm a hiker, a biker, I'm a golfer, I run a small business, I'm an educator, I'm a CPA, I'm a nurse. Just think about that. When we begin to talk about our story and say who we are, what does it reveal about us, about our story? But of course, I'm a preacher, so you would expect me to ask the question about our spiritual story and how that fits into our big story. So we might say, I'm a Christian, or I'm a Presbyterian, or I'm a follower of Jesus. Or we might say, I grew up Roman Catholic, or I was raised Baptist, or I was brought up in a family where, we were not religious at all. We called ourselves Christian, but not really. I don't know about you, but what I find now is that many of us like to define our religious story in generic terms, so we say that we are spiritual, so that we're a spiritual person, so there's an open-endedness about it. We live in a culture where being spiritual is cool, right? Not Presbyterian, or I'm a church member, which seems so institutional and so yesterday, or dull. You with me? Well, of course, spirituality has become somewhat mainstream in pop culture. From movie stars to rock stars to fiction writers. When we hear them talk, they're talking about their spirituality sometimes, or the spirituality that's in a song or a movie or whatever. And you wonder, well, why has this spiritual interest moved into the mainstream? And maybe it's because the world has become increasingly technological or scientific, or it's a sign that we're moving beyond the age of reason, or that we are just fed up with consumerism and to want more and buy bigger, or maybe we're just tired of this pop psychology, self-help, problem-solving formula stuff, and we think there's an answer in the spiritual. I, for one, am somewhat delighted that people are talking about spirituality. And of course, you've heard my encouragement about our congregation learning spiritual practices. I mean, it's a way to take our heady Presbyterian faith in a direction where we know God rather than just about God. But I am increasingly suspicious or disappointed, because there seems to be this disturbing connection between spirituality and self-absorption. A focus on me and on my story and my spiritual journey. And in that sense, this spiritual movement can be called, I think, maybe spirituality light. Jesus says, you are the salt of the world. You are the light of the world. You are a city built on a hill. What Jesus is saying is something very different from a private, inward-looking faith, but something very public that is out in the world, that is in the world, that is for the world. This faith Jesus invites us into is not something that is primarily focused on our relationship with God, though we do know that Jesus prayed alone for long periods. But Jesus points to a faith that pushes us out of our quiet prayer times and out of our worship and out of our Bible studies and out of our comfort zones. And this is not to say, and please hear me, that I'm somehow slamming spirituality. I am not. Or that I'm slamming spiritual practices or that part of faith that desperately needs an inward journey of prayer and Bible study and contemplation. What I'm taking issue with is a faith that primarily focuses on me, on us, so much that spirituality becomes an end in itself. No. Jesus said, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. You are a city built on a hill. Now, salt was a vital substance in Jesus' day. It was so valuable that people were sometimes paid in salt. Salt, of course, was critical in preserving food in a day when there was no cold storage. It was also flavor added to food, which as today can make something bland become something more tasty. What Jesus was saying is that following him is about taking our love, our compassion, our ethics into the world to preserve it, to give it flavor. Which is to say, there's this strong connection between being spiritual and living in the world, living for the world. That message is perhaps easily understood with that second metaphor, which is the metaphor of light that shines, or a city built on a hill. These metaphors point explicitly to a faith that places us out in the world, visible, shining our light, standing on top of a hill where we can be seen and where we can be heard. I mean, what a powerful symbol for the church, right? A city built on a hill. However, popular culture often sees spirituality as something private. And good-meaning Christians, even Presbyterians, can see faith as something so personal and so private that we hide our faith under a bushel basket, as Jesus says on the Sermon on the Mount. Norman Jurgen has been a pastor, a teacher, a hospice chaplain, a church administrator, and now he is working as a college administrator in Riverside, California. So he spends his evenings and weekends as a personal pastor. Here's his advertisement. If a person's pastor is not taking appointments anytime soon, or if you haven't been in church for years and have no relationship with a pastor, Norman is available on a fee-for-service basis. Call, and he'll provide chaplaincy services or spiritual intervention or perform a wedding or a funeral or a baby dedication. Some ask Jurgen why he charges for his pastoral services, and he says, "Show me a church that doesn't take up an offering. What I offer has no overhead costs at all. You pay for what you get." I'm not making this up, right? He's not the only one. There are similar pastoral online service sites where you can get personal theological coaching, general pastoral services, pastoral care for the major crises of life, theological writings which can be distributed to your email inbox or by snail mail. Really? If we were looking for how spirituality has run amok, okay, this is the poster child. I call it spirituality light. It's certainly not being a light to the world or a city built on a hill. A group of church women were looking for a service project. It was their way of being salt and light. It seems their community was a favorite destination for vacationing teenagers in the spring and summer. Think Myrtle Beach or Panama City or Daytona Beach. So along with soaking up the rays, these teens sometimes drank too much and caroused too much and broke the law, and some of them ended up in jail. One of the women in the church group suggested they consider a ministry to these teenagers who found themselves in jail, who were often waiting for money from home to pay the fine or to post bail. So the women decided to make toiletry kits, right? Toothbrushes, shampoo, soap, and a piece of candy or two. But the women were taken aback by the conditions they found in the jail. And they were concerned about how many were in the jail during these peak seasons when teenagers visited. One of the women discovered that their community was collecting an absurd amount of money from taxes and the jail cost during the year. And so, in essence, jailing the teenagers had become a money racket and a source of important revenue for their community. As these women got more involved, they became more and more concerned. They discovered that once behind bars, there was no distinction between the teenagers incarcerated and those who had been there many, many times before. One of the women reported back to the church in a committee meeting, "Our city jail is a disgrace," she said. Then things really got interesting. A group from the church went to the city officials in charge of the jail, including the sheriff, and the sheriff said this: "I knew we were in trouble, that we were asking for trouble when we let you women stick your noses into things. Why don't you stick to church work? What goes on here is really none of your business." And one of the women responded, "This is the church's business." Eventually, the sheriff was ousted, and reform began. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. You are a city built on a hill. Each of us has a story. And I called this sermon, "Pick Your Story." But here's the truth. If we have claimed Christ, if we have said that we are Christians, that we are followers of Jesus, then that story claims us. And that is our primary story. You are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. You are a city built on a hill. That's our story.